Hi, it's Ed Martin, president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, back again for some more fact checking. You know, if you go to realmrsamerica.com, if you like and share and sign up to subscribe right down there, it'll make a big difference as we try to still fight back against Mrs. America, the $50 million FX produced. It was streamed on Hulu. By the way, just a few days ago, it started streaming over in the UK. They're in for 7 weeks or whatever it is of this nonsense and these lies. So they'll be looking at realmrsamerica.com too to check it out. You know, the makers, the creators of Mrs. America, they're ramping up for the Emmy Awards. The Emmy Awards take place in the third week of September in 2020, but the nominations are announced in just 2 weeks or so, very soon. So you can see suddenly the directors are out, they're doing interviews, they're pushing, and they're letting their bias show because they want the voters of the Emmys to vote for this great liberal piece of whatever. So here's the directors, Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck, that's their name, the two directors, and they've shown how they twisted history. They actually admit, it's so brazen, right? They admit that they're lying about history in an interview in Vanity Fair. So let's set the record straight, shall we? In the Vanity Fair piece, which is called Mrs. America and the Lonely Victory of Phyllis Schlafly, that's what they call it. Well, Anna Boden, the director, she starts out by acknowledging that they're just twisting history. She starts out saying she lied. Can you imagine doing interviews and admitting you lied? Here's what Boden said. She said, quote, "We knew that it was going to be a tragedy and knew that everybody loses in the end, including Phyllis," end quote. You must be kidding me. Phyllis Schlafly didn't lose anything. She and her band of fearless women, they won the fight. And the idea that they lost, or Phyllis lost in particular, it's just silly. She won, plain and simple. And not only did she win and beat the ERA, but she built a movement of people who cared for each other and had fun together and loved each other. There's a picture that we're posting right here. You can see it now of Phyllis with friends at a surprise birthday party, or 75th birthday party. I can tell you over and over again, there were these gatherings of fellow fighters against the ERA. They had such joy. And Phyllis had this wonderful family, grandchildren, her children, her friends, extraordinary. It's just a crazy idea that she lost. And Phyllis Schlafly, she never regretted for a moment that she put her family and friends first. Not for one moment. Here, the article then goes on to say this, quote, "The directors had to deliver a sense of comeuppance for Schlafly, who became the victim of her own victory." Again, it's a lie. It's a total lie. In other words, they had to not let this woman win who had such great success and leadership and dynamism and was both beautiful and smart and had been a writer and a TV personality, all these things. They had to find some way to give her comeuppance. This article in Vanity Fair is a hit piece showing how intellectually dishonest Mrs. America was, and also how intellectually dishonest these journalists are. Vanity Fair is not writing a piece of journalism, they're spewing what Mrs. America did. You know, Phyllis Schlafly never expected anything from anybody. It wasn't her style. She didn't expect a spot in Reagan's cabinet. It wasn't what she did. She had her husband and her family in Missouri. She wasn't going to, in Alton, Illinois, and in Missouri, where she was doing so many things, she wasn't going to move to D.C. at that time. She did ask and was pleased to be put on the commission for the bicentennial of the United States Constitution. You know, Chief Justice Warren Burger stepped down to serve on that commission. It was a big deal for a few years. That's one thing that she wanted because she believed the Constitution was so important and thought she could do some wonderful things on that commission, which she did. If you've looked at our fact checks, the other fact checks, and again, go to realmrsamerica.com and check them all out, we covered how closely Phyllis and Ronald Reagan worked together. They had what we would call a real relationship on policy and the issues of the day. Sometimes they even disagreed, but they knew the direction for America was so important. You know, these directors are bragging about using the power of Hollywood and cinema to leave the viewers with the wrong impression of Phyllis Schlafly. They're bragging about it because they want to look good for the Emmy Award voters. And it's just not true. In the last scene, they do this dramatic depiction, pure fiction, of Phyllis Schlafly, and she's dejected. And they play a sad song as she's in her kitchen baking. And somehow she's mourning the fact that the fake Ronald Reagan has called and not given her a post. And they admit this. Anna Boden, again, the director, says, quote, "It was so emotional." And then we had the idea of letting it stop, the music. And when it stopped, then continue on in silence. We played so much with that, letting the song end and then having her continue chopping in the kitchen, remember, just makes it feel like she's going to be doing this for the rest of her life. Now, think about that as we watch the clip that I just told you about from Mrs. America. Remember, she's admitted it's fiction. She's admitted she's spinning. She's admitted she's trying to deceive people. Watch this clip.
Oh, I can sympathize with a heart that is distressed, but every bird who's wise will build herself a nest. She looked at me and sighed, and a miracle occurred. The little weaver bird, God weaving.
That was a full 33 seconds of silent apple peeling just to make Phyllis Schlafly look lonely? What liars. Director Ryan Fleck, he was not at all ashamed. Again, these people are brazen. Not ashamed to admit his bias. He was quoted as saying, quote, "The thing that Phyllis was after was just more and more power for herself, and she didn't get it," end quote. What are you talking about, Ryan? You haven't even paid attention to what her life was about, her work was about. It's crazy. Anna Boden, the other director, goes on to say, quote, Phyllis doesn't have to be like that. And by the time you get to the last episode, she's basically alienated and isolated herself from all those relationships, just slowly, one by one, betrayed by all these people who she could be sharing the pain or disappointment with. And instead, she's totally alone. These people are lunatics. Phyllis Schlafly was celebrated and was joyful all through the 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2010s. She was doing all kinds of fun things and leading. The idea that there was alienation and isolation, it's wrong, it's ignorant, and it's downright mean. These are mean people. These are mean people. Phyllis Schlafly was loved. She was happy. She had friends from all across the country and the world. She used to revel in one of her friends from Australia who did conservative work. Babette Francis would come visit. She had people that were all over, and she didn't spend the rest of her days peeling apples, although she did like cooking, and she probably spent some of her time doing those things. Does anyone really think that President Trump, for example, or any of the other Republicans who did this, they courted Phyllis Schlafly's endorsement? Do you think they did it because she was dejected and lonely and left behind? No. They did it because she was powerful and she was smart and she understood how politics worked, and more than anything, she loved America. And her advice and her insight, her thoughtfulness, it was sought by people because they knew she was something special. She brought something special to America. It was worth talking to her about, learning from, and ultimately, for President Trump or others, to seek the endorsement. Phyllis Schlafly, I've said this over and over, maybe this is the theme of the fact checks. Phyllis never told all women to do anything. She didn't believe that all women should be told to do one thing or another. That wasn't her role. She wanted choices for women. Phyllis used to say she had it all, just not all at once. And she wanted the choice of being a homemaker to be valuable because she believed it was the greatest job. It was the greatest choice and something she wanted to do. She did not believe what these feminists and these liars say, that somehow she was trapped in her home and that she, was going to be trapped there. She didn't think anyone else should be talked about like that. Phyllis's life, in some ways, is the perfect case study for a book she wrote. It's called The Power of the Positive Woman. If you read that book, you'll see what she meant about how powerful a positive woman could be. powerful, positive, loved, and loving. I'll tell you this, if you study that book, go to realmissamerica.com, study Phyllis Schlafly. The world needs more women like Phyllis Schlafly, a lot more. Please go to realmissamerica.com and keep checking these fact checks. Thanks for being here now. We appreciate it. Pass it on to others. We'll probably be back together soon. We got more work to do. Again, realmissamerica.com. Thanks.